Close your eyes and drift back to February 27, 1996, when a small cartridge for the Game Boy changed gaming forever. On that day in Japan, Pokémon Red and Green launched, beginning a phenomenon that would eventually captivate hundreds of millions of people worldwide. But the journey to that release date was anything but straightforward. It took 6 years of development, multiple near bankruptcies, and the unwavering vision of a man who loved collecting insects as a child. This is the story of how Pokémon Red and Green came to exist, not through myths or rumors, but through the documented challenges, creative decisions, and technical limitations that shaped these groundbreaking games. From the cramped offices of Game Freak to the technical constraints of the Game Boy hardware, every aspect of Pokémon's creation involved choices that would define not just these games, but an entire franchise that persists nearly 30 years later. The story begins not in '96, but in 1990, when Satoshi Tajiri first conceived the idea that would become Pokémon. Tajiri, who had founded Game Freak as a gaming magazine before transitioning to game development, drew inspiration from his childhood hobby of insect collecting in rural Japan. As urbanization transformed the landscape of his youth, Tajiri wanted to recreate that experience of discovery and collection for a new generation growing up in cities without access to the natural world he had known. The concept was simple in theory, but revolutionary in execution. Create a game where players could catch and collect creatures, then trade them with friends using the Game Boy's link cable feature. The link cable, introduced with the Game Boy's 1989 launch, was primarily used for competitive multiplayer in games like Tetris. Tajiri envisioned something different: cooperation rather than competition, building collections together rather than simply defeating each other. This vision required convincing Nintendo to support the project, which proved challenging. Nintendo, while intrigued by the concept, was skeptical about whether Game Freak, a small, relatively inexperienced development studio, could execute such an ambitious project. The Game Boy was already several years old by 1990, and Nintendo's focus was shifting toward newer hardware. Nevertheless, Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo's legendary designer, saw potential in Tajiri's pitch and helped secure support for the project. What Nintendo and even Tajiri himself didn't fully appreciate at the time was just how long and difficult the development process would become. The Game Boy, despite its popularity and portability, was an extremely limited platform from a technical perspective. The original Game Boy featured a CPU running at approximately 4.19 MHz, a speed that seems impossibly slow by modern standards. The system had just 8 kilobytes of RAM for working memory, forcing developers to be extraordinarily creative in how they structured their code and managed game data. The cartridges themselves presented additional constraints. While later Game Boy cartridges could hold up to several megabytes of data, the technology in 1990 was more limited and expensive. Every byte had to be carefully considered. Every sprite, every piece of music, every line of text consumed precious space that had to be balanced against the game's ambitions. Game Freak's team, led by Tajiri and programmer Junichi Masuda, spent countless hours optimizing code to squeeze maximum functionality from minimal resources. Masuda, who would later become one of the most important figures in Pokémon's ongoing development, wore multiple hats during the creation of Red and Green. He programmed core game systems, composed the music, and worked on sound design, all while helping to manage the broader development process. This kind of multitasking was necessary for a small studio with limited resources, but it also meant that progress was slow and methodical. The technical challenges extended beyond simple memory limitations. The Game Boy's screen, with its resolution of 160 by 144 pixels displayed in 4 shades of green, required careful sprite design. Ken Sugimori, who handled character design and art direction, had to create Pokémon that would be recognizable and appealing despite these severe constraints. Each Pokémon needed both a front sprite and a back sprite for battles, along with a smaller overworld sprite if it appeared outside of combat scenarios. Sugimori's design process involved creating detailed illustrations of each Pokémon, then working with pixel artists to translate those designs into the low-resolution sprites the Game Boy could display. This translation often required significant compromises. Fine details had to be simplified or eliminated entirely. Color information present in Sugimori's original artwork had to be conveyed purely through patterns of pixels in monochrome green. The original roster of Pokémon went through numerous revisions during development. While the final games launched with 151 Pokémon, earlier builds contained different numbers, with creatures being added, removed, or redesigned as the team refined their vision. Some Pokémon that existed in early development were cut entirely, their data either removed or repurposed for other creatures. Beta sprites that have since been recovered through various leaks show that many Pokémon look significantly different in earlier stages of development. One of the core design decisions that shaped Pokémon Red and Green was the implementation of version exclusives, certain creatures that could only be caught in one version of the game or the other. This wasn't simply a way to sell more copies, though it certainly had that effect. The version exclusive system was designed to encourage the social trading that Tajiri envisioned as central to the Pokémon experience. In the Red version, players could encounter Pokémon like Ekans, the snake Pokémon, and Growlithe, the puppy Pokémon. In the Green version, those species were unavailable, replaced by Sandshrew, the mouse Pokémon, and Vulpix, the fox Pokémon. Other version exclusive pairs existed throughout the game, creating scenarios where players needed to connect with friends to complete their collections. Importantly, the starter Pokémon, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, were not version exclusives. Every player, regardless of which version they purchased, chose one of these three Pokémon at the beginning of their journey. This ensured that no player was locked out of experiencing these iconic creatures based solely on their version choice. The decision reflected a balance between encouraging trading and ensuring fair access to the game's most memorable Pokémon. Similarly, the legendary birds, Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, appeared in both versions. These powerful, rare Pokémon represented ice, electricity, and fire respectively, and could be found in specific locations in Kanto regardless of version. This accessibility was deliberate, ensuring that every player could experience the thrill of encountering and catching these legendary creatures without needing to trade. The battle system that would become Pokémon's signature feature evolved significantly during development. Early prototypes featured simpler combat mechanics where outcomes were primarily determined by level and basic stats. As development progressed, the team implemented the type system that would become fundamental to Pokémon strategy. Fire beats grass, water beats fire, grass beats water, with numerous additional types creating a complex web of strengths and weaknesses. This type system wasn't just about memorizing a chart of interactions. It added strategic depth that elevated Pokémon beyond simple button mashing. Players needed to consider their team composition, anticipate opponent moves, and make tactical decisions about when to switch Pokémon or use items. The system was intuitive enough for children to grasp the basics while offering enough complexity to sustain interest for more experienced players. Each Pokémon had base statistics determining its strengths in different areas: hit points, attack power, defense, speed, and special abilities. These base stats, combined with individual variation in the effects of training, meant that every Pokémon was unique. Two Pikachu caught by different players might have noticeably different performance characteristics, encouraging experimentation and creating attachment to specific individuals within a species. The move system complemented these mechanics, with each Pokémon able to learn up to 4 moves at a time. Moves could be learned naturally through leveling up, taught using technical machines and hidden machines, or passed down through breeding in later generations. This limitation to 4 moves forced meaningful choices. Players had to decide which attacks and abilities to keep and which to replace as new options became available. Game Freak's financial situation during this extended development period was precarious. The company came close to bankruptcy multiple times between 1990 and 1996. Team members worked without full pay, sustained by part-time jobs and pure dedication to the project. Tajiri himself has spoken about this period, describing the uncertainty and stress of trying to complete the game while wondering if the company would survive long enough to see it released. Nintendo's support, while present, was not unlimited. The company provided development tools and technical assistance, but Game Freak remained an independent studio responsible for its own finances. This independence meant creative freedom, but also financial risk. Every month that development continued without revenue pushed the company closer to insolvency. The music composed by Masuda reflected the Game Boy's audio limitations. The system could produce only 4 channels of sound simultaneously: 2 pulse wave channels, 1 wave channel, and 1 noise channel. Within these constraints, Masuda created melodies that have become iconic. The battle themes, the town music, the rote themes, all had to be constructed from these 4 simple audio channels, yet they remained memorable decades later. Masuda has described his compositional process as one of embracing limitations rather than fighting them. Rather than trying to make the Game Boy sound like something it wasn't, he composed specifically for the system's capabilities, creating music that sounded complete within those constraints. This philosophy of working with, rather than against technical limitations, characterized much of Pokémon's development. As 1996 approached, the game finally neared completion. 6 years of development had produced something unique: a role-playing game with collection mechanics, social features through trading, and an entire world of creatures to discover. The team prepared for launch with cautious optimism. They believed they had created something special, but couldn't predict how Japanese audiences would respond. February 27, 96 arrived. Pokémon Red and Green launched in Japan with relatively modest marketing. Nintendo didn't expect the game to be a major hit. It was released on aging hardware from a small developer with an unusual concept that didn't fit neatly into established genres. Initial sales were steady but not spectacular. The game sold approximately 200,000 copies in their first few weeks, respectable but not extraordinary. What happened next surprised everyone. Word of mouth began spreading among Japanese children. The trading mechanic worked exactly as Tajiri had envisioned. Kids talked about Pokémon at school, compared their collections, and connected their Game Boys during lunch and after classes. The social element created organic marketing that no advertising campaign could replicate. Children who owned the game became evangelists, showing it to friends who then wanted their own copies. The phenomenon built gradually through 1996 and into 1997. Sales accelerated as more children heard about Pokémon from their peers. Magazine coverage increased. Television commercials began airing. The snowball effect that would eventually make Pokémon a global phenomenon had begun, starting from that initial launch on February 27, 1996. Koro Koro Comic, a popular manga magazine for children, played a significant role in Pokémon's growing popularity. The magazine began featuring Pokémon manga and providing tips about the games. Readers responded enthusiastically, writing letters about their adventures and asking questions about rare Pokémon. This media coverage helped sustain and amplify the word-of-mouth momentum. The success in Japan led to the development of an enhanced version called Pokémon Blue, which featured improved graphics and fixed various bugs present in Red and Green. Blue's programming served as the basis for the international releases, with the Western versions called Red and Blue incorporating these improvements. The games wouldn't reach North America and Europe until September 1998, more than 2 years after the Japanese launch. That international release transformed Pokémon from a Japanese phenomenon into a global cultural force. The timing proved fortuitous. The Game Boy Color had just launched, providing new hardware that could display the games in color for the first time through backward compatibility. The anime series aired alongside the game releases, creating multimedia synergy that introduced Pokémon through multiple channels simultaneously. The technical achievement of fitting Pokémon Red and Green onto Game Boy cartridges shouldn't be understated. The games contained an entire world to explore, multiple towns, numerous routes connecting them, caves and buildings to investigate, and 151 unique creatures with distinct stats, moves, and sprites. Managing all of this data within the Game Boy's constraints required exceptional programming efficiency. The game's code included numerous clever optimizations. Pokémon cries, for instance, were often variations of the same base sound files, adjusted in pitch and speed to create the illusion of unique sounds for each species while minimizing memory usage. Graphics tiles were reused extensively, with different color palettes applied to create variety, without requiring duplicate sprites. Text compression ensured dialogue, and descriptions consumed minimal space. These technical decisions, made out of necessity, became part of Pokémon's charm. The limitations forced creativity, resulting in design choices that felt intentional rather than compromised. The simple graphics allowed players' imaginations to fill in details. The limited audio created memorable, hummable melodies. The constrained text made dialogue punchy and efficient. The battle system's depth emerged partially from these same constraints. With limited space for complex AI routines, opponent behavior followed a relatively simple patterns, but the type system and move interactions created emergent complexity. Players couldn't simply overlevel their starting Pokémon and blast through every challenge. Type disadvantages mattered, requiring thought about team composition and strategy. Pokémon's social features distinguished it from other Game Boy RPGs. While games like Final Fantasy Adventure and the Saga series offered compelling single-player experiences, none emphasized multiplayer interaction the way Pokémon did. The trading system wasn't just a gimmick, it was fundamental to the game's design, enabling experiences impossible in isolation. Trading also introduced elements of trust and social negotiation. When two players connected their Game Boys to trade Pokémon, they had to agree on terms. Was this trade fair? Did both players benefit? These negotiations, conducted face-to-face since online trading didn't exist, taught social skills while enhancing the gaming experience. Children learned about fairness, value, and cooperation through these interactions. The mystery surrounding certain Pokémon enhanced their appeal. Rumors spread about rare creatures hiding in specific locations. Children shared tips about where to find legendary Pokémon, which items were needed, and what strategies worked for catching difficult species. Much of this information was inaccurate or exaggerated, but the playground mythology surrounding Pokémon became part of the experience. Mew, the 151st Pokémon, exemplified this mysterious appeal. While that's a story for another discussion, the existence of secrets and hidden elements in the games encouraged exploration and experimentation. Players felt that secrets remained to be discovered, that perhaps their cartridge held something unique or special that others hadn't found. The success of Pokémon Red and Green validated Tajiri's vision and justified Game Freak's 6-year commitment to the project. What began as one man's nostalgia for insect collecting became a franchise generating billions of dollars in revenue. But more importantly, it became a cultural touchstone, a shared experience that connected millions of players worldwide. The games released on February 27, 1996 weren't perfect. They contained bugs that would be fixed in later versions. The graphics were simple even by Game Boy standards. The AI was exploitable by knowledgeable players, but these imperfections didn't diminish the game's impact. They created something that resonated with players on a level that transcended technical specifications. Looking back at Pokémon Red and Green, nearly 30 years after their release, we can see how they established patterns that would define the franchise for decades. The formula of choosing a starter, traveling across a region, collecting badges, and completing the Pokédex has persisted through 9 generations. The social aspects of trading and battling remain central despite massive technological changes, enabling online play. The legacy of February 12, 1996 extends beyond the games themselves. That date marked the birth of a franchise that would influence game design, demonstrate the viability of monster collecting games, and prove that social features could enhance single-player experiences. Every Pokémon game since has built on the foundation established by Red and Green, refining and expanding the formula while maintaining its core essence. The development story offers lessons for any creative endeavor. Game Freak's persistence through financial hardship, their willingness to spend 6 years perfecting their vision, and their ability to work creatively within severe constraints all contributed to creating something meaningful and lasting. The technical limitations that seemed like obstacles became opportunities for innovation. As we reflect on this journey from concept to release, from Tajiri's childhood insect collecting to a Game Boy cartridge available in Japanese stores, we see how dedication and vision can overcome obstacles. The path wasn't straightforward, success wasn't guaranteed, But on February 12th, 1996, all those years of work crystallized into something that would change gaming forever. The story of Pokémon Red and Green reminds us that creating something meaningful takes time, requires perseverance, and often involves working within constraints rather than unlimited resources. Those Game Boy cartridges released nearly 30 years ago contained more than just a game. They held the culmination of 6 years of passion, creativity, and determination that would inspire countless players and developers for generations to come.